lovely learners. How are you all doing today? I hope you are doing great. We thank God for giving us another opportunity to continue with our virtual learning. And I'm very glad that we still have life. I salute you and I welcome you to today's lesson. Now, in our previous lessons, we talked about living things and non-living things. Living things and their properties or their characteristics. Now today we are talking about the non-living thing, which is under elements, compound, and mixtures. So elements are natural substances made up of atoms of the same kind. Elements are natural substances or materials which are not living things. So it means they are non-living things. So today we are talking about elements. Now before then, we are expecting something from you at the end of the lesson, and therefore I'll continue to urge you to pay attention so that by the end of today's lesson you should be able to explain the terms elements, compounds, and mixtures. And two, you should be able to classify materials into elements, compounds, and mixtures as well. Last but not least, you should be able to outline some characteristics or properties of elements. So this is what we are going to talk about today, and I'll continue to urge you to stay focused so that at the end of the lesson you should be able to achieve all these objectives. Now to move on, what are elements? Elements or an element is defined as a simple chemical substance that consists of atoms of only one kind and cannot be broken into any simpler substances by ordinary chemical means. Once again, an element is defined as a simple chemical substance which is natural substance that consists of atoms of only one kind and cannot be broken into any simpler substances by ordinary chemical means. Now when you talk of atoms, they are smallest particles that can take part in chemical reactions. Every material or substance contains atoms, and these atoms or particles made up the material. So for instance, if you take the chalk, it's made up of particles. So you see, the smallest particles are the atoms which combined or made up the chalk. That is all particles. I hope you've seen it. So we are talking about elements. Now let's look at some examples of elements which we have. We have hydrogen, aluminium, which you all know is common. Aluminium is metal. We also have oxygen, and this is also natural element which is in a gaseous or gas form, and that is what? Air. We also have lead, another example of element. Lead is a natural substance which is a metal, but a soft type of metal. We also have iron. You all know iron rods or iron metal. You can mention the other examples of elements. Now let's talk about the compound. The compound here, we are not talking about the school compound or the area within the school or in the house. That's not what we are talking about. We are talking about compound under science. And compound under science is a chemical combination of two or more elements. It's a chemical combination of two or more elements. Examples of such elements or such compounds, we have water, which is made up of hydrogen and oxygen. So two gases combined chemically to form water. and this is what we are talking about as compound. We also have salt. Salt, you all know, we have different types of salt. We have the common salt or the table salt, which you all use at home when preparing food or preparation of food. And salt is also formed as a result of chemical combination of sodium plus chlorine. And this forms what? Sodium chloride, which is salt. So you can see what we are talking about here, about the compound. We also have chalk, which is an example of a compound. This is chalk. As you all know, this is chalk. It's an example of compound. Now let's talk about mixtures. Mixtures are physical combination of two or more substances. It's a physical combination of two or more substances, which means that you can form your own mixtures, or you can make a mixture on your own or of your own, which is simple, and therefore is what? Physical combination. So examples of mixtures, we have salty water, that is brine, or salt plus water forms a mixture, and that is brine or salt solution. You also have sugar solution, which is a combination, physical combination of sugar and water, that is a mixture. You also have gari and sugar. When you mix them together, you get a mixture. Gari and sugar. Example, when you want to prepare soakings, okay, that is what? A mixture. You also have soup. Soup is made up of various cooking ingredients which comes together to form soup, and that one too is a mixture. You can mention the component that constitute soup depending on how mommy prepares it at home. I hope you are jotting down notes. Now let's look at some characteristics or properties of elements. Now these natural elements, some exist as solids. Some exist as solid. It means that they are in a solid form, like when you take the metal is solid. Some also exist in liquid form. We have the one in a liquid form. Example, mercury, which is not mentioned here. Mercury can exist in liquid form and at the same time a solid form. We also have it in gaseous form or exist in gases. That is, element can be in a gaseous form as to the oxygen or hydrogen. These are characteristics of elements. Now another characteristic is that elements look different from each other and have different densities. That is, they weigh different amount. In other words, they have different weights. Different elements or substances have different weights, and that is what their densities. Now another characteristics or properties of elements is that they combine in different ways to form compounds. Example is what we are seeing here. We have water combining chemically with oxygen to form H2O, and that is what the water, as you all know, which we use for various forms or ways. We also have sodium, which can combine with chlorine to form sodium chloride, which is the salt, NaCN, that is the sodium chloride. So this is how elements combine in different ways to form compounds. Now let's look at some classifications or classes of elements. Classes of elements. Now classify the following elements or materials. Classify the following materials into elements, compounds, and mixtures. Now let's look at the solution. We will draw a table for elements. We have elements, we have compounds, we have mixtures. So let's look at something here. Now let's take the first one. The first one is ion filings. Now ion filings are particles of ion. or particles of metals. When you cut metals, the particles that comes out, that is the ion filings. So ion filing is under element. So you put it here, ion filings. Now let's look at the second substance or material, which is water. And you know water is a combination, chemical combination of hydrogen and oxygen, which means that water is under compound. Let's look at salt. Salt, you all know, is also produced as a chemical combination of two elements, and that is the sodium, which is a metal, and chlorine, which is also another substance in the gaseous form. So this combine to form salt, and therefore salt is also under compound. Now let's look at blood. Blood is composed of various elements or materials, and therefore is a mixture. We have food nutrients mixing with blood. We also have oxygen mixing with blood and the rest. So blood is under mixtures. Let's look at soil. Soil, you all know, is the upper layer of the earth, and it's made up of a lot of materials which mix together or mixes together to form the soil, and therefore soil too is under mixtures. Let's look at alcohol. Alcohol is produced chemically from palm wine and water, and this process is also under compounds, or this can be under what? Compound. That is alcohol. Alcohol is a compound. Let's look at the next one, sugar. Sugar too is another compound or example of compound. So you put it here. Chalk too is under compound. So we have chalk, which is under compound. Oxygen. You know oxygen is natural element, and therefore oxygen is under element, oxygen or fresh air. And silicon is under element, which is in between the metals and non-metals, which means that it's a semi-metal. And semi-metal is a natural element which is under element, and therefore silicon too can be classified under element. So these are the substances or materials which we have under elements, compounds, and mixtures. I hope you can mention a lot, or you can give other examples of such materials, and you can group them under the following headings. This is where time will permit us in order to save data for other lessons. So this is where we end our lesson. God bless you for your attention. Until we meet again, bye bye.